Hi, my name is Annika Misra, and I'm going to be presenting on the mathematics and visual art. This is significant to me because I am an artist. I've been drawing since I was 6, and before the pandemic, I used to paint in an art studio every weekend for 5 years. And I also love math because I just like how logical it is, and it's one of my favorite subjects in school. So, in my art studio, one day, I saw a student painting. She was copying a photo she had taken, and she was making it larger by painting it onto the canvas. However, instead of painting directly onto the canvas, I noticed that both the photo and the canvas had grid marks. It appeared she was using a form of scaling to make sure her proportions were correct, otherwise known as the grid method. I thought, hey, that looks just like the graphs we use in math class. It was initially shocking to see math and art being combined together. Previously, I thought of them as two completely different worlds because math uses reason and is very concrete and defined, whereas art is not concrete and defined whatsoever. I began to wonder, how often is math actually used in art? And this leads me to my knowledge question, which is, to what extent is math present in visual art? The areas of knowledge in this question are mathematics and the arts, and the ways of knowing that I'll be exploring are reason, which is used in mathematics for logic of numbers, rules of math, etc., intuition, what feels right when creating art, and emotion, which is what drives many of us to create art. Art is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. I will only be talking about 2D visual art, such as paintings, drawings, and graphic art, because that is what I know and that's what relates best to my real life situation. I'm aware that this can be a limitation because other forms of art may use mathematics in different ways. Two other questions I considered were what mathematical patterns are used in art and how does mathematical knowledge affect the interpretation of art? But art is more complicated than patterns and interpretation, which is what caused me to broaden my knowledge question. This knowledge question helps me explain my real life situation better because I want to know if it's only the grid method that's being used in art or if there are other more subtle mathematical applications being used in art that I never noticed. Essentially, I'm trying to figure out how much math is being used, or in other words, to what extent is mathematics present in visual art. This also may lead to a knowledge issue because does one necessarily need to be educated in math to be considered a good artist? So first, I'm going to be exploring the aspect of reason. On the aspect of reason, to what extent is mathematics present in visual art? One perspective is that mathematics is significant in art when it comes to reason. Mathematics is known to be reasonable because it has concrete rules, numbers, and logic that one has to follow. The aforementioned grid method clearly uses mathematics like a graph to make sure that scaling and proportions are correct using rules and reasoning. But even when it's not something as obvious as the grid method, mathematics can be a lot more present than one would think. This right here is a simple image of a bridge, or maybe not. There are actually a lot of rules and reasoning that go in behind it. This is a classic example of the vanishing point. The vanishing point uses two lines that have negative slopes of each other so that it can create the illusion of vanishing at a certain point. The two lines must have approximately opposing slopes and they must intersect. This is a rule. This is an example of mathematical reasoning being used in art. It doesn't necessarily have to be drawn out like the grid method. It can just be approximated in the artist's head, but it's still using mathematical reason. The artist uses reason here. They know that if they don't follow the mathematical rules, for example, if they made the lines parallel instead of intersecting, this would create a cube instead of a vanishing point. That is why, in terms of reason, mathematics is very present in art. Another perspective is that not all types of art require rules. What about some types of abstract art? Much of the reason in art actually does not include math. For example, choosing colors. In the image shown below, this is girl with a pearl earring, and the background is dark and the subject is light. The artist specifically chose this lighting and used reason here because they wanted to make their subject more visible and the background more hidden. This is reusing reason in art, but it's not necessarily using mathematical reasoning in art. In addition, abstract art does not require mathematical reasoning. This is number 5 by Jackson Pollock, where the only thing mathematical about it is its title. There is some reason that is used here once again. For example, maybe the artist used reason to determine which layers to drip on top of which, but that is not mathematical reasoning. However, even in a lot of abstract paintings, they do use mathematical reasoning. This is an example of geometric abstract art where the artist still used reason here because they knew that they must create parallel lines so that it would look like a square. This is an example of mathematical reason. So overall, as one can see with vanishing point, cubes, most techniques, and even in abstract art, math is used to create art. Combining both of these perspectives together, overall, in the aspect of reason, math is present in art to a significant extent. Then there is the aspect of emotion. In the aspect of emotion, to what extent is mathematics present in visual art? There are multiple perspectives to this, one being that in the aspect of emotion, mathematics is not present in visual art. Emotion is known to have a significant influence in art. It can be argued that emotions drive art in the first place. For example, in The Scream by Edward Munch in 1893, in the painting itself, a man is depicted with fear, and this work was an expression of the artist's anxiety. In Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, this was also an expression of his own sadness, his own depression. Artists also often use blues and sad dark colors when they are to create unhappy and sad moods, and warm and bright colors to create happy moods. So as is visible, emotion plays a very significant role in art. On the other hand, math does not use emotion whatsoever. No matter how someone is feeling, 5 plus 5 is always 10, and the derivative sign is always cosine. That does not change with emotion. So, in the emotional aspect of art, math plays no role. Another perspective on this is that perhaps when there is a lack of emotion, mathematics is present in visual art. If an artist is practicing a drawing technique, there is no emotion behind it, so that's where math comes in. However, this claim might be weak because we are looking at emotion right now, so it does need to be there. In addition, this claim has limitations because most art pieces aren't practices. They are masterpieces that were originally driven by emotion. So overall, combining these two perspectives together, in the emotional aspect, math is not present in visual art. Now we can talk about the area of knowledge of the way of knowing of intuition. The first perspective is that in terms of intuition, math is very present in visual art. Going back to my real life situation, I never used the grid method like the other student did because I relied on my intuition to guide me on what looked right. I did this for other techniques as well, for example, the vanishing point, and even when I draw cubes, I didn't realize that actually I was supposed to use parallel lines or negative slopes. I just did it because it looked right, it felt right. The whole time I was using my intuition to guide me, but this intuition was being guided by these mathematical rules. Then we can get into the concept of beauty. Going back to the definition of art, it is also created for beauty. But where does this idea of beauty come from? Now I'm going to introduce the golden ratio. In mathematics, two items are in the golden ratio if the ratio to each other is the same as the ratio of both of them to the larger item. I know this sounds a little bit confusing, but I've introduced some pictures here to help. And overall, it helps if one remembers that the golden ratio is a specific number of 1.618 or 0.618. And this is important because in math, this golden ratio is known as to be kind of is what is the most aesthetically pleasing to the human eye. And the golden spiral, by the way, is based on the golden ratio. Now, why is this important? Well, this simple number is not only known to be pleasing to the eye, but it's also visible a lot of the times in art. In this Vitruvian Man picture by Leonardo da Vinci in 1490, Leonardo da Vinci originally created this because he wanted to create the ideal man with the ideal proportions, the most beautiful, the most aesthetic. And Leonardo da Vinci did not actually know about this golden ratio. He was just using intuition to guide him on what felt right, what felt the most beautiful to him. It turns out that actually many of the proportions and ratios in this ideal, beautiful aesthetic was the golden ratio. So Da Vinci did not know about this number. He was just creating what felt right, what felt most beautiful to him. But this whole time, his intuition was being driven by this mathematical number. And in fact, many other artistic pieces use the golden ratio. So even something as intuitive as beauty has mathematics in it, whether it's just the drawing technique itself or if it's something as undefined and abstract as beauty. In terms of intuition, artists are using math all the time, even when they don't realize it. Another perspective, however, is that it's not really that simple, and that in terms of intuition, math is not present in visual art. All art is created through lines, so you can find any mathematical relationship between them. And beauty cannot necessarily be defined by one number. It's all in the eye of the beholder. This golden ratio could just be a coincidence for all one knows. And artists can also use intuition in non-mathematical ways, such as when artists use their intuition to choose what color feels right to them. That is using intuition in a non-mathematical way. Combining, however, more often than not, intuition is used in a mathematical way. So combining these two perspectives together, overall, in terms of intuition, math is present in visual art to a moderately large extent. Overall, looking at reason, emotion, and intuition, and through multiple perspectives, we can see that mathematics is present in visual art to a fairly large extent. In reason, artists use mathematical techniques all the time, and they use reason because they know if they don't follow these rules, then the piece will not come out the way they intend to. In emotion, on the other hand, mathematics is not as present. And in intuition, more often than not, artistic intuition is guided by mathematics. Combining all these ways of knowing and perspectives together, we reach our conclusion. One flaw in this conclusion, however, is that both visual art and math are such broad topics. People spend their entire lives studying art, and there are just so many different aspects in it that's hard to think of and cover them all. And other artists may have different perspectives on this. Like I mentioned, art is such a broad topic, so if artists focus on different aspects of art than I did, they may come up with very different conclusions. Going back to my real life situation, in the grid method, the student was very obviously using mathematics in her art because she was using it as she was using mathematical reason to help create her art. Then also in the intuition that she was using to guide her, whether she realized it or not when she was creating all those lines, there was mathematical intuition behind that as well. Additional situations my conclusion can be used in are the golden ratio in Leonardo da Vinci's paintings and the vanishing method, the art technique using lines that have opposite slopes. I know that in the future when I'm creating something and using my intuition to determine what feels right, I will question exactly what mathematical rule that I am using. And perhaps art in this case can be used to teach math as well.